On the profile interview segment this week, I'll be speaking with the General Secretary of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Comrade Emmanuel Ugboaja. He brings us up to speed on the need for relevant stakeholders to do the needful in terms of monitoring, in terms of implementation of the needed facilities to ensure that workplaces are safe according to the International Labour Organization standard. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
A lot has been happening in the world of work, and it seems not to be so palatable because of so many challenges that the country is faced with. But first, I want to concentrate on the issue of industrialization and safety in the workplace. Right now, as we're speaking, there are a lot of accidents that have been happening in the workplace, and nobody seems to want to take responsibility. How would you react to this?
Yeah, it's a pretty sad one, actually, because each time we talk about industrialization and we don't focus on safety, particularly in our country, then we miss the point. Because rather than become a gain, we then turn it to a terrible phenomenon for our people. Because we have the challenge of genuine monitoring of the workplace, genuine inspection. The other day we were having a conversation around amending or reviewing regulations that have to do with the Factories Act to bring it up to speed to global acceptable standards. And fortunately, even at the global level, the ILO has brought up the issue of health and safety. It's been prioritized and made a key issue in the world of work. It's now a fundamental right. It's now a human right issue. So, but increasingly, because of the desire to quickly make money, the desire to cut corners, we're having so much accidents in the factories, particularly with new work environments. The established work environments obviously have standard codes that they kind of are adhering to, but the new factories that are upcoming, that are being installed, who resort to cheap labor in quote, to cut corners, don't put their workforce through proper training, particularly with regards to health and safety. So we're having a huge number of industrial accidents, particularly of young people, because that's what makes it more depressing. Young people are losing their limbs, losing their lives, and it's quite a frightening scenario.
What do you think should be done to ensure that most industrial organizations are safety compliant?
We need to increase enforcement of regulations, particularly where factories are sited, who gives the approvals for their buildings, for the arrangements of machinery in the workplace. What we are seeing increasingly is factories are being sited even in residential areas. Factories are being sited outside the prying eyes of the public, so to say. So you then have the inspectors probably not even being aware of where these places are. And most of these factory sites, the employers there resist unionization. 80%, if not 95% of the challenges we're having are coming from unorganized factories. Factories that the owners have resisted unionization, where there is no union, and we only get to know that such places exist from complaints arising from such incidents. Because when the young people then go home, they say, go to NLC, go to labor. And that is when we then get to know that you then start meandering through residential areas, you start meandering through off-road locations in some neighborhoods, and then you realize that some kind of productive venture has been going on with machines that ordinarily should be properly monitored, properly supervised and worked with, but it's not going. So definitely, the regulatory capability in terms of manpower, distribution, in terms of regular visitations, and maybe more campaigns, enlightenment campaigns to put the citizens to get involved. We might need to have some citizens' involvement in letting them know that some production activities should be going on in some neighborhoods. Residential neighborhoods shouldn't have factories. And where such exists, they should be able to not necessarily whistle blow, but at least put it out there for people to know that there is a factory here. Get the ministry to establish hotlines that people can reach to say there's a factory in so street, there's a factory in so village, so that there can be some link between the citizens and the ministry.
Okay, you spoke about unionization of workers and that most of these affected or impacted companies do not allow unionization of workers. As the General Secretary of the Nigerian Labour Congress, what more do you think the Congress can do to address this issue of maybe companies not wanting to unionize workers, of ensuring that we have mass unionization?
Yeah, ordinarily, very clearly, it's a democratic right, and for any country that genuinely loves its citizens, that should be a cause that shouldn't be left just to the trade unions. Ironically, the U.S. President Biden, will tell you publicly that he's not ashamed to be called a workers' president. He takes unionization of work very seriously. It's a policy. In fairness, under his watch, there is a committee on organizing, on unionization within the White House that monitors, advises, and guides him. And for every opportunity he has, he tells corporate America, you cannot tamper with the workers' ability to organize, the workers' ability to belong to a trade union. That should be the catchphrase, even in Nigeria, if people have their own people at heart. You can't say you love your citizens, you want to serve your citizens, and you watch them under your own eyes, not that they are traveling to Europe or America, in their own country being enslaved in terms of lack of appreciation of standards, which ordinarily you have subscribed to. The Nigerian government is part of the ILO family, and the ILO family is the global standard on managing the world, which is a tripartite nature: the government, the employer, and the worker. So you should consciously create an enabling environment, consciously put up policies and activities that encourage your citizens to exercise their right to unionize, to organize. So it should be an aberration. Management that put up stiff resistance very forcefully should be discouraged. They should know that it will be wrong, there can be room for them to do business genuinely if they refuse to recognize the right of the worker to organize, because it's a fundamental right. It's a right the Nigerian government has given into by ratifying the conventions, the ILO conventions in that regard. So clearly for us is the need to really begin to see the Nigerian citizen as human, that should enjoy some rights, rather than see it is their business. You can't say it's the business of your citizens, because their health and safety should be paramount to you, and their health and safety starts with you showing interest, and then them also collaborating with you, and not throwing them to the dogs to an exploitative employer. Any employer that understands the world of work genuinely cannot say no to unionization. But to anyone that is crude, that wants to belong to the Stone Age, then shouldn't have any room operating in a modern environment. So clearly, that's the standard we should be wishing for, because that is the right thing to do.
When it comes to inflation that we're experiencing in the country, talking about forex that is not stable, how do you think decent work can be prioritized in this kind of situation? Because the employers also have to make profit.
Yeah, clearly for us, it's for all hands to be on deck. There can be an employer without an employee, and there cannot be a company without a worker. So when people make the heavy wind of workers, it becomes a challenge of chicken and egg, which comes first. You're not going to call yourself a top flight blue chip company if there are no people working there. People have to work for your company to answer blue chip. You won't answer blue chip from the thin air. And if the conditions of those working for you don't make sense, then it's an accident waiting to happen. So clearly, the decent work agenda is an agenda that is for the sustainable existence of the world. It's for us to have certainty of job security, the social protection being available, the work environment being safe, provisions to make sure nobody is left behind. So any environment you think that can be work without it being decent means you are deluding yourself. And that is what then leads to continuous decline. You are not going to have a productive sector like what is happening in the education sector with unhappy staff. It will then be your productivity and the products that will come out of that will not meet standards, and it then becomes a vicious circle. So from the takeoff point, there's no cutting corners. It has to be a decent job every step of the way. It cannot be for one part and then the other part will be out of it. No, because like the saying goes, one bad apple spoils the lot. So every apple in this instance has to be top flight. So clearly for us, it's for government to appreciate the need for decent work environment in terms of the pillars that constitute it, because in the long run, it pays off everybody. If the worker is properly remunerated, he would then be able to have decent purchasing power to purchase the goods that are being produced and pay for the services being rendered. If you don't have that, then you are trying to milk just a few. So if you produce a million cars and only 10 people have the capacity to buy it, yeah, that car industry is going to fold up. So you cannot put much emphasis on one side and leave the other. You must strike that balance. So clearly for us, it's something that all hands must be on deck. Nobody is more important than the other. Once we begin to appreciate that it's a tripod and we need each other to sustain the existence of the world, then it definitely will appreciate the concept of decent work agenda.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for the fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember that labor creates wealth.